Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Mike Shea. I got Andy Cagnetta and Henry Ziff from our London office and our favorite immigration attorney, Lisa Kahn. So wanted to jump on a call and get a immigration update. There is some positive news on the immigration front. So Lisa, glad your surgery is good and you're back on your feet. And, you know, given hospital dynamics that are going on right now, it's a little worrisome to hear you were down for the count, but you're back on. And so why don't you give us an update on what's going on the immigration front, specific to London, but globally as well.
Sure. Okay. So the good news is the U.S. embassies worldwide are beginning to reopen for visa issuance and normal visa services and operations. It's going to be, it'll vary country to country, embassy by embassy, according to what the local conditions are or any local or county or state orders related to coronavirus. But the good thing for the U.S. Embassy in London is that they are resuming visa issuance and operation services. They said officially July 27th, but it's actually happening already. The priority is going to be immigrant visas for spouses of U.S. citizens and children of U.S. citizens, as well as student visas, the F1 academic students, and then the M1 vocational students. And I think that's, because the school year is due to commence really, next month in the U.S. So those will be the priorities. I had a client who's the husband of a U.S. citizen and has been waiting for his immigrant visa or green card visa. The paperwork was done and he was ready for an interview really in March of this year, and then, put the brakes on that with the whole COVID and the embassy closure. So fortunately, we were able to make an appointment for him now that they're resuming services. We made the appointment yesterday. He went in and, half an hour there and should have his immigrant visa within a week or so. So that's good. It really is happening. People are able to go in person to the embassy, have visa interviews. We haven't yet heard on the E2 visas. I think they're going to work through a little bit of a backlog of what their priority is, which is going to be the immediate relatives of citizens that have been waiting, and then the student visas, and then hopefully shift over to E2s and other visas as well. So I guess the good news, even though we're still kind of in this, wait and see and not quite sure on specifics and all of that, but at least the good news is we're returning to a little bit greater sense of normalcy and operations starting up again. That said, we still have this travel ban in effect for individuals who've been in the UK or in the Schengen area countries, as well as Brazil, that prohibits those individuals from coming to the US if they've been in the UK within the last 14 days. So that's another aspect. If an individual were to go, let's say for an E2 visa in a week or two or so, they could have the visa but not really be able to enter the US with it. So that's problematic and has been problematic for people who already have a visa that have wanted to go to visit family members. There's two ways to address that or to kind of work around that. One is individuals who've been, say, in the UK that have a valid visa can go to a third country that's not part of the travel ban countries. And I had this happen with an E2 client it was the wife and son had gone back in maybe March and were stuck there, and the rest of the family here. They flew to Serbia for 14 days, stayed there, and then were able to fly direct from Serbia to the US. I think they flew into JFK and were able to be admitted because they were not banned because they had not been in the UK during the last 14 days. So they were able to work around that by going to another country. So you've got to kind of research, well, what country would allow me to come and stay for 2 weeks and make sure that it's not part of the travel ban countries and then be able to enter. A little bit, awkward, I guess, and expensive and problematic for most to do something like that. However, the good thing is there's now a national interest exception for certain travelers from the Schengen area, from the UK and Ireland, that already have a valid visa or issued a valid visa. So this would apply to E2 folks. what they can apply for through the embassy is an exception from that travel ban. It also applies really for visitors, people who might be coming on an ESTA. There's different criteria for the national interest exception. It could be a medical need, somebody who's coming to the U.S. to get medical care that they really can't obtain perhaps in their home country. They might be coming to the U.S. for a funeral or a death or a grave illness of a family member that's here. Or, and this is the important one, I think, for E2 visa purposes, urgent business travel. And they essentially what you do is you email the embassy and
Lisa, you've gone on mute.
Lisa, you went mute.
Lisa.
Yeah, unmute yourself.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yep, I think I
So you were at essentially you, and then you went dead.
okay, so I think for a business traveler who's seeking this national interest exception to the travel ban, what you have to do is request it from the embassy. So you have to email the embassy, explain the nature of the travel, show that you've got a valid visa, and then they're saying that they would like is things along the lines of a letter of invitation from a company in the U.S. explaining the urgency of the intended visit, or describing the nature of the business and how a U.S. or local company would suffer a significant loss of opportunity if an exemption is not granted. So for a lot of E2 folks that may want to go back to see a sick relative, for example, in the UK, but are afraid that they're not going to be able to return, if they do go out or they're stuck in the UK, they can ask for this national interest exception on the basis that they are an investor and that their business, they need to be in the U.S. to continue to run the business, or jobs will be lost, or they'll have to let people go, or they may have to fold the company, and that's not good for the U.S. economy. So this is brand new, and I don't really have a good read on success yet with the London embassy or how long it's taking to get one of these exceptions. But I know for sure of at least one E2 visa holder who applied for it through Bern, Switzerland, and was granted within a matter of a few days. And nothing out of the ordinary, just someone on an E2 that needs to get back and run their E2 business. So it's something that's encouraging, but it's really all developing now.
On the exception front, is there an angle? I hate to use that term, but is there an angle for, because we've already seen, you and I have seen one transaction that the seller couldn't wait anymore and literally shut the business down.
Right.
Now that it's open, is there a way to push, hey, we've got business, both American citizens and their businesses, trying to transact and conduct business. We've got investors who are kind of in limbo to play to use the exception policy to facilitate a little speedier E2 processing?
Yeah, the tricky thing right now is that the national interest exception applies to business travelers, investors, academics, E1 treaty traders, and J1 students who already have a valid visa or have an ESTA. It says, or that they're seeking to apply for a visa but feel they have it. So I think it's going to be easier for this to be granted for somebody who already has a visa and is just sort of stuck with this travel ban, rather than somebody who says, hey, I'm in the queue waiting for an E2 visa appointment along with everybody else who filed in maybe January, February, March, or thereafter. I think there's an argument to be made, and it's worth a shot, that I don't know if it would succeed or not, but I think it's worth a shot that, can I get bumped to the front of the queue or the line because this business deal is going to fall through, jobs will be lost, a business will fold, etc. I have a feeling the embassy might say, yeah, you and everybody else, to a certain degree, with pending E2s, that a lot of the deals are maybe hanging by a thread, so it may be hard to distinguish for somebody who doesn't already have a visa.
Good lawyerly answer.
Lisa, a couple questions. Was the person, just to clarify, was the person that traveled from Switzerland, was that person already an E2 visa holder, just trying to travel?
Yes.
So, okay, fine. So rather
yeah.
than
So already had an E2 business here, had departed at some point, and now found themselves stuck and unable to get back to kind of resume business operations, because they're in a Schengen area country.
Sure. And have the interviews changed at all? Are they quicker because of the backlog, or is it still the same?
Well, the only interview I have really to gauge is the one for the immigrant visa from yesterday. Those are generally fairly straightforward in a clean case. His was very clean. He's been married to a citizen for 5-6 years. They've been living together. They have joint, assets. And they've been living in London. They've got 2 children, so pretty squeaky clean. He said the interview itself was probably 25 minutes. So I think that's pretty fast. I think that they're probably trying to, keep the face-to-face interaction to a minimum and move things along as best they can. On the U.S. end too, for folks that have, say, a citizenship application or a green card application that needs to be interviewed at the local office, those interviews are resuming as well. And we had a citizenship interview this week in Orlando. The nice thing for me now is that they're preferring less people in the office, so attorneys can now choose to attend telephonically. So they will call me, and then I can attend the interview telephonically. What surprised me is we had an interview at 9:10 a.m. and the officer called me at 9:13, and we were done by 9:35. So it was clipping along really fast, very efficient at the local office, which is not the norm. Typically, we'd wait maybe an hour to be called in past the appointment date. So that was nice. I think they are definitely at the local office streamlining the procedures, and they have fewer interviews in a day as well for social distancing and safety purposes. So I think the same thing's probably happening at the embassy. There's fewer people on a given day at the embassy, and things are moving along more efficiently.
Okay, cool. And go for it, Mike.
Go ahead, Henry.
I was going to ask, just going back to that point around where people can travel from then. So apart from Serbia, where are beautiful this time of year?
That kind of depends, and honestly, it changes day by day. So you have to, it's not without risk. For example, I think, the Bahamas was open, and now as of this last week, it's kind of shut down. So, that you have to kind of check with the different countries and hope that nothing changes. I know, Serbia was open. That worked well for someone else. Mexico has been a good option for people too. I know of people who've been going to Cancun or Puerto Vallarta, some to kind of refresh they have a valid E2 visa, but their lawful stay in the U.S. is expiring. So they've gone to Mexico for a few days, come back in and gotten a fresh admission. But then, I guess the nerve-wracking thing there is everything is so fluid. And so somebody could go to a third country, and while there, that country now is part of the travel ban, or maybe that country says, look, we're not allowing anybody else to come in now.
Sure.
But Lisa, mechanically how that would work in theory is, so say I've got a client in the UK, they process their E2, but UK is still under the travel ban. What you're saying is they have the ability in theory, given the fluidity of the system, this is a risk, but they could go into Serbia, which has no ban, stay there for 15 days, and then transition and conduct the closing.
Yeah, and then fly directly to the U.S. And they have to fly to one of, I think, 11 airports. Right.
So to Henry's point, I think Miami's one of them where there's direct flights and things like that. To Henry's point, we on our end and Henry's side, as we're dealing with our customers, have to kind of, okay, here's the war game. Here's the countries where, and where would I find that info? Where would I find the info of the countries that are not under the current ban?
I guess maybe it's a little bit of process of elimination. It's the countries, I can tell you the countries where we have the ban is the UK, Ireland, the Schengen area countries, and then Brazil and Iran. So any country that's not part of that list potentially could work. But then the catch is, all right, is that country allowing people to enter? What are their restrictions?
And then are there flights from that country to one of the accepting international airport? Okay.
Right. And can you get a direct flight? So the one that had gone to Serbia, they flew on Serbia Air direct from there to JFK.
And they could catch a ride back to Florida with Andy.
That's the Transworld service.
We'll pick you up.
Well,
and we'll travel.
We've done stranger things, right? This is kind of like what we did last year with with Gerardo when we had the issue in Honduras and we had to pivot him through El Salvador to get him through. I mean, different scenario.
Yeah.
We're not talking about embassies on fire this time, but
Right.
so there is an ability to navigate this system. It's not just something that's locked down. And I think the buyers, the businesses, and the sellers need to understand that, you know, we're doing what we can and we'll navigate it. But there's expense. And oh, by the way, I hear Serbia is beautiful this time of year. So.
Well, I'll tell you, the family that went there had a lovely time, and I think they were pleased with how it all.
Lisa, you're back on mute again. Henry.
I think I just unmuted. There we go.
What's going on in London? Is it back to normal?
So that's a great question. And London's a bit of like an ecosystem outside the rest of the UK. Certainly not normal. It's probably kind of back to maybe like a third of what it is. You know, restaurants, bars, coffee shops are very quiet. People are trying to open up, and I think are in that kind of situation where people aren't necessarily coming into London. There's obviously no tourists at the moment, and things like that. So hotels are still, I think, mostly closed. Restaurants are trying to open and do things from like a social distance, those kind of things, takeaways. So yeah, I think we're maybe a few weeks behind what you guys went through when the economy started opening up.
But you're not having flare-ups, right? You guys are still executing some.
So mostly people are trying to stay socially distant, all those things. So I think our numbers are continuously beginning to decline. We've had a couple of flare-ups, not in London, but in a couple of other cities. And they've kind of locked down those cities very specifically, and, you know, done the right things to stop the spread. And I think that, you know, that's what we kind of see in other places in Europe as well now, where there's a flare-up of coronavirus. They just lock down like a city or a region, and kind of make people go back to March, April, and start again.
But the government is executing enforcement better than, say, we're doing in Fort Lauderdale, right? Where we're having a massive flare. No offense, Andy.
No, I mean, listen, you know, I think it was a grand social experiment where, you know, everybody's literally shut down, and then, you know, you let everybody go out there with very loose rules, and, you know, people overdid it. So I think there's somewhat of a pullback, and, you know, everybody's trying to figure out exactly how to, you know, bring down that rate of infection. And I do believe, I'm pretty optimistic that they will, now that, you know, people are being a little bit more socially distant and wearing their masks. I mean, you know, what I continue to see, and I think Michael, you could address this as well, is we're going to continue to do business. People understand that we're going to have to do things a different way, and we'll persevere.
Yeah, well, that's part of the purpose of this call is, you know, I know in our Orlando office, we've got about a dozen customers stuck in various scenarios. And, you know, last month we had a seller just say, I couldn't wait any longer. And now I have another client who is, you know, the sellers are getting frustrated, and, you know, we're doing our job. We've done a petition within the BBF up to our congressman to rattle the noise and say, hey, y'all need to be, you know, recognize there's an economic impact, and you guys need to get together on safety and protocol and figure out ways to navigate. It shouldn't be up to 3 business brokers and an immigration lawyer to figure out a way how to get this stuff done. Although we're probably on this front smarter than they are with regard to, you know, the procedures and the processes than the congressmen are. But we will figure it out. So Lisa, I appreciate it. Gentlemen, you got any more stuff for Lisa while we let her go?
No, we appreciate your expertise, and thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I'll keep you posted because, you know, things are changing frequently. So I try to keep Mike in the loop as best I can when there's anything to share.
So if you guys need any expert immigration advice, Lisa Kahn is, you know, what I consider the best immigration attorney in Florida. And her website is www.lisavisa.com. And Lisa, what's the phone number for the office?
407-351-9075. And my email is lisa@lisavisa.com.
Thank you so much. Everyone have a
You're
safe.
very welcome.
Andy, drive safe, and don't catch anything and bring it back.